All right. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And you said you talked about believing in the grassroots, and it's more than just believing in the grassroots. I am a testament to grassroots organizing, whether it's my very first campaign for the state assembly or the most recent race for lieutenant governor, and that will certainly be the critical component of this race for the United States Senate. We didn't win against Scott Walker and Rebecca Clayfish without a grassroots movement, and we won't defeat Ron Johnson without a grassroots movement. And the important thing to recognize with that in mind is that we won't win any race if we're solely against something. And that's been one of my biggest criticisms about the party that I am very much a member of is we do an incredible job at talking about how bad the other side is, remarkable even. But the fact is there are still so many people across this state, so many people across the country who don't know what we represent. They don't know what we stand for. And every race that I've been a part of, especially the one in 2018, I recognize how important it was for us to talk about our values, to talk about our vision, and to lead with that. And to be unafraid to talk about the challenges that people are dealing with, but also about big, bold solutions. So I just want to thank you all for having me because I personally recognize the importance of the Menomonee Falls Action Team. I don't think I would be here speaking to you as Lieutenant Governor if it were not for the work that you all have been a part of. And so I'm deeply appreciative of that because, every time I talk to folks, whether it's national news outlets or even my friends, they say, oh, Wisconsin's a swing state, but we don't have to be a swing state. Ron Johnson is the last remaining Republican elected to statewide office here in Wisconsin. We deserve better. We can do so much better than we've been doing. But it won't just happen on its own. It happens because of grassroots organizing. It happens when we show up in communities all across Wisconsin. I was speaking at the Rural Caucus, the Rural Caucus of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin about a month ago. And I said, we can't take votes for granted, whether it's assuming that people in Milwaukee and Madison are going to show up for us, or assuming that people in more rural parts of the state won't show up for us. And I also said, I'm not expecting to win every county because that's just not reality. But the fact is we don't have to lose 70-30 in some of these places. We can narrow that down to 60-40 if we start to make some traction, make inroads with people. And this has to happen outside of campaigning. People have to know who we are, who we represent when it's not election time. And that's why over the course of the last several years, and I won't even say that's why, because that's not the reason. We had to do the work that was necessary. But in our first year in office, the governor and I both got to all 72 counties. And we were very deliberate about that. We want to be a 72 county administration. We didn't want to fall into the trap of people saying, oh yeah, you just represent the Southeastern portion of the state. Well, that's not the case. We wanted to be there in as many places as possible. And I'll tell you, some of the reasons we took those trips to, different parts of the state, they weren't so pretty. A lot of it was storm damage tours. Some of it was working with county health officials on the issue of expansion of Medicaid or the lack thereof, or even responding to the addiction crisis that continues to rip apart our state. And it's sort of gone under the radar because we have the pandemic front and center, but there are communities all across Wisconsin who are dealing with the addiction crisis more so than they were before. And it's important for us to be able to step up to talk about our plan to uplift communities, because the problem is there's been so much despair, there's been so much disregard, so many communities have been left behind, so many communities have been forgotten, whether you're in Milwaukee or whether you're all the way up north in Hayward. But with that being said, my own personal experience, being born and raised in the city of Milwaukee, with both parents being active union members, I knew that we couldn't just settle for what was. My dad, I remember vividly my dad going on strike. I remember challenges that my mom would talk about. She was always a delegate to the National Assembly for the NEA, and my parents effectively put me on this path that I'm on today because of the example that they set. That's why I was able to start college relatively early at the tender age of 16, got elected to the state assembly at the age of 25, got elected as lieutenant governor at 31. And this has been the most amazing opportunity that I've ever had because I've gotten a chance to meet with so many people. I've gotten to have so many conversations with folks I would have never had the chance to meet before. And people share their stories. People talk about their lives. And the more stories I hear, the more I'm able to help create bridges or help talk about how life in Milwaukee is not so much different from theirs, how the challenges that people are facing in terms of healthcare affordability or accessibility exist in all parts of our state. Issues with the environment and the need to address climate change impacts every part of our state. And the need for us to create an economy that works for everybody continues to be a problem as we see so much consolidation with these large factory farms taking over and disrupting the lives of so many family farmers, so many family operations that have been with us for generations, for hundreds of years, some even before Wisconsin was a state, when Wisconsin was still its territory. In order for us to preserve and enhance quality of life, we have to come together. We can't fall into these traps anymore. We don't have to make these false choices of urban versus rural, because that is a myth that only benefits Republicans. That is a myth that they use to further divide us, because they know that once we join together in solidarity and talk about the issues that matter, once we join together to take on inequality, they know that it's over for them. And it's not always a left and right thing. It's a top and a bottom. And we have to go and not be afraid to have conversations with people wherever they are. And we know that there's still so much more work to be done. Since I've been in office, as I said, I've traveled to every corner of the state. Some of the most intensive work we've been a part of was helping to lead the vaccination and recovery efforts here in Wisconsin. We've been a part of some Main Street revitalization efforts up north and other parts of the state. And I also got to lead the governor's task force on climate change that delivered concrete solutions for the state of Wisconsin to address the climate crisis. I am very proud and honored to have been a part of that work. I'm especially proud of the membership of that task force, because we brought together people from all parts of the state, different walks of life, environmental advocacy leaders, even utility companies, organized labor, our indigenous communities. We had youth climate activists and so much more, so many more people who wanted to do the work to address climate change, understanding the realities that existed. Now, you know, when I mentioned that utilities were a part of this task force, a lot of people kind of give a little bit of pause, but the reality is overwhelming majority of people in the state are still going to get their electricity delivered by a utility company. And they needed to be a part of the conversation because they need to know what people are calling for, what people are asking for. And the remarkable thing too is that, membership of the task force, there are people who may traditionally be at odds with each other, people who may have been the subject of a press release from an organization, but they had to come to the table together to talk about a path forward, to talk about what truly matters and how Wisconsin has to assume a leadership role in the issue of combating climate change. And we put together a list of 55 recommendations that span 9 different sectors. And I am proud to say that that is the most ambitious agenda to combat climate change that we've seen in this state before. But it's about pressing forward. It's about being bold. It's about being innovative. And we've done big things here in the state before. Historically, that's who we are. It was quite literally woven into our fabric, of our state's motto being forward. But we strayed away. And it's time for us to get back to leading again, to being innovators, to driving the progressive change in this country that we should be. And that's why I decided to step up to run, because the work that has to be done to address the challenges and the issues that people face in every zip code. And we know people like one of our current senators who is continuing to stand in the way of progress, giving safe haven to insurrectionists through his rhetoric, peddling conspiracy theories that makes our efforts to get people vaccinated that much more difficult. And as I mentioned, we've done the bold things before, and Senator Johnson is quite literally very much out of line with the history of this state. We were the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment. We were a leader in the fight for labor rights. We're the first state to pass statewide protections for LGBT individuals. We're the first state to declare the Fugitive Slave Act unconstitutional. And I'm looking forward to continuing that legacy, to tackle climate change, to make sure that every person in this state, in this country, has the health care that they deserve, and also making sure that we look at infrastructure in totality, understanding that, yes, roads and bridges are incredibly important, and we do have many structurally deficient roads and bridges in this state, but that also should include high-speed internet. That should also mean green infrastructure to make sure that we are able to participate in the economy of the future, to make sure that we do the work to deliver for our family farms and to protect our most sacred right, which is the right to vote. And again, it just comes down to opportunity. Opportunity and equity for every person in this state, every child, every adult. And we've had an incredible launch so far. The first 4 weeks have been incredible. This event actually right now rounds out week 4. And it's amazing that it's gone by so quickly. But our Milwaukee launch event drew hundreds of people at noon on a weekday, surprised even myself. I was very worried the night before about who was going to show up on the day that the Bucks were in the NBA Finals. And it was also noon on a weekday. But we've been able to travel around the state. We've gotten decent press coverage at Farm Technology Days in Eau Claire. And we also had a roundtable in a farm not far away from Farm Technology Days in Eau Claire. We've had conversations about rural broadband with local leaders in Wausau. And I'm proud to say that the momentum has kept building up. We've got endorsers from all across the state. Congresswoman Gwen Moore was one of the very first to step up to lend her endorsement. Joe Parisi, county executive in Dane County, and a number of mayors from all across the state. We have double digits when it comes to sitting legislators, and this is more than anyone else in the primary combined. And then there was the poll that was in Milwaukee County that showed me that was far ahead of any of my primary opponents. Granted, it is still very early, and we've learned our lessons about poll numbers, but it is a testament to the work that we've been doing, because we had 39% in that poll, and no one else currently in the race had over 5%. And that is because I've been active doing the work, anything that I talk about in this campaign that I want to address. I have a track record, a background of having addressed those issues. And that started even before I was lieutenant governor. It was before I was a state representative. It was during my time at MICA when I was a community organizer, making sure that people got their fair share in neighborhoods that I grew up in. But look, none of this stuff that we talk about matters if I don't have support from grassroots organizations. That's how I started this conversation. That's how I'm going to end it, because that's how I won this race for lieutenant governor. It's how I was able to make it to the state assembly. And this is how we're going to make history once again, electing a new senator who's going to fight for the right thing, one that is going to push for progress and not hold us back, as we've seen happen too often. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in a place where we're hoping for 1 or 2 members of the Senate to finally come around on the issues that matter to people, whether it's raising the minimum wage, whether it's passing an infrastructure bill that addresses the multiple issues that it could and should be dealing with, or whatever else. And I just appreciate you all for having me this evening, for taking the time to listen to what I have to say. And I hope to earn your support, because this is an incredibly important race. We are one of the top 3 races, CNN according to CNN. And I'm excited that we're in this. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to make this state proud. We're going to show the country what it means to lead with progressive values and to actually win.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I had a couple questions that came in over text. I did want to ask one, and then I'll open it up to folks if they just want to unmute. From Sarah, B, and Manny, they're both wondering how you plan to deal with how you would plan to deal with the election fraud that is happening in our state right now. Our own state representative, Janelle Branchin, led a delegation to Arizona to watch the nonsense that they were doing there. And how do you see things in our state moving forward? Is there a way to stop what Republicans are doing? And is For the People Act the solution?
Yeah, I'll start from the back by saying the For the People Act is absolutely the solution. But as my good friend Katie Hobbs, we were both in the state legislature at the same time, and as Secretary of State in Arizona, she is the second in line for the governorship. So she participates in Lieutenant Governors Association. It's a fraud. It is not a real thing, and these are people who have all the privilege in the world, and we see it being exhibited with this witch hunt. It is incredibly ridiculous that they don't like the election results, so something must have gone wrong. It isn't the fact that they've lost touch with the American public. It isn't the fact that they are not in tune with the needs of people all across this country. Something just had to go wrong because, God forbid, they be taken into account at the ballot box. They have everything they want in state legislatures across the country with gerrymandering, but in a national election, which there are still flaws with the Electoral College, is another conversation for another day. But the fact is, they are so far out of the mainstream what the American people are thinking, specifically here in Wisconsin, where they have balked at the opportunity to expand badger care. Marijuana legalization is not on the table. Raising the minimum wage is not on the table. But all of a sudden, if they lose an election, somebody must have cheated. No, that's not the case. You just have they have rendered themselves irrelevant and unable to respond to a changing electorate. They have shown that they are unwilling to stand up and truly represent the people of this country. And as long as gerrymandering is allowed to happen, which For the People Act would remedy, we're going to get people like Janelle Branchen, people who continue to peddle conspiracy theories. And this was what we thought was reserved to some dark corners of the internet, but it's not. These people are getting elected to school boards, which is scary, across the country. These people are getting elected to state legislatures, and quite honestly, they have Ron Johnson, who was one of them as well. And we show up to the ballot boxes. There's no easy solution to this. One, we absolutely have to win our elections, but we have to continue to win. We have to continue to make sure that this sort of information isn't spreading or continue to spread within our own circles. And we gotta fight this darkness with the light. We gotta fight these lies with the truth.
Absolutely. Neil Plotkin, one of our great candidates for state senate, just asked a great question. He said, our legislature has worked strenuously to restrict voting access and opportunity. What do we need to do to maximize voter turnout in 2022?
I'll tell you, Joe Biden caught a lot of flack when he said that you got to organize, and so it's a both. You got to do both. Of course, you have to organize. You have to organize regardless. But what we have to do is organize to elect candidates who are going to be pro-democracy, not just pro-democracy, because that's not enough. Candidates who are going to be dedicated to democracy, candidates that are going to fight for it with everything that it deserves. I mean, Joe Manchin talks about, being in West Virginia. I get it. I get the electorate there. I understand it. But I can assure you that the people of West Virginia value democracy and the ability to cast a vote. We're not talking about some controversial package of bills. We are talking about the sacred rights that we should all have. And when I run down my list of issues, people say, oh, what about voting rights? I'm like, well, I don't necessarily see voting rights as something that is negotiable. This is a right that we should all expect. And unfortunately, we see too many people who want to try to infringe on the right to do so. Now, here in Wisconsin, we would be a Florida, we would be a Texas if we didn't have Governor Evers with the veto pen. And that's why it's incredibly important that we continue to organize. To Joe Biden's point, I think he he had the spirit correct, right? I think the way he said it rubbed a few folks wrong. So yes, we do have to organize, but that organizing effort has to be to make sure that we have people in office who are going to do the right thing, even if it doesn't benefit them, right? Like when my opposition to gerrymandering, I don't think it's okay when Democrats do it. I think that we need more fair systems so that the people's voice and the will of the people can truly be reflected.
And I want to go ahead and open it up if anybody would like to unmute yourself, ask a question. Otherwise, I have one final one for the Lieutenant Governor.
I have a quick question. Just recently I called Senator Alberta Darling's office and spoke to a gentleman there. And honestly, I wasn't aware of the. I figured there were suppressive movements being made, but they have put on in the Senate bill 209, 207, 20 whatever, and basically it's suppressing votes. At the same time, they want to reduce the number of drop box ballots to one per municipality. They have a conservative lawsuit coming up, saying that drop boxes are illegal. So how are you guys going to handle that? How are we going to handle that? When I think the whole point of saying that the election is a fraud is so they can scurry around with these laws to push through at the state level. So it really isn't about the last election. It seems to me it's about the upcoming election. And really, I'm nervous about it. How are you and Governor going to fight that? Are we okay?
Thank you for that. Thank you for the
Yeah.
concern. I mean, to my earlier point, we do have the governor. If we
Yeah.
didn't, it would be much easier for them to go around and we would see more voter suppression signed into law here. And some of these things are just going to become court battles, which they've already become. They're using every means they possibly can. And that's one thing conservatives have done over last several decades. Since they have been very very keen on making sure that they get the courts. It's not a fight that we were particularly concerned with as we should have been, and it's the same way they fought for state legislatures. We were always concerned with the White House. Congress, sure, I don't even think Congress got the attention that it deserved, but this just goes to show that there is no election, no office that doesn't matter. And to that point, right now, no. I mean, there isn't, like, Tony's not going to turn heel and start signing this stuff into law. But to that point, we have to make sure that we reelect the governor. And 2022 is going to be a crucial year. They're going to come after him and make up lies about his record. They're going to distort his character. And they're going to do that with all Democrats on the ballot. And that's all they do, because they can't win with their own ideas anymore. The only thing they can do is bend and twist the truth to their will and hope that it goes over with just enough people. Like these conspiracy theorist movements, this whole QAnon thing, it represents a very small population, but it is enough people that this stuff begins to spread like wildfire, and to seemingly more intelligible circles, which does have me alarmed. That's the part that has me frightened, is like the ease of disinformation, not necessarily the voter restriction. Of course, that's concerning, but right now, like I said, we have the governor, so that's not the case. But there are some very dangerous undercurrents. I mean, that story about, like, was it a guy in Florida or something? He killed his children because he thought they had lizard blood. Like, this is how scary this stuff is right now. And I think that's what we have to be on the lookout for, to make sure that the people we know have have proper information and can combat false information. But I honestly don't know what to do when it comes to a person who thinks that their children have lizard blood. Right? This is how dark and scary it's gotten. I wish it was just the door-to-door talking about the bread and butter issues as we should be, but as we see, it's a lot deeper. But that is also why organizing is important.
And then I'll just, we won't take more of your time. We really appreciate it. I'll ask the last one, which is kind of all encompassing, three messages that I got. People saying that there are many qualified candidates right now running for this seat. What makes you the best candidate? And do you believe in building sort of a coalition if you win?
So there are a number of qualified candidates. I will say, though, to be very honest, I am the only candidate who's had to prove himself in office, taking on the challenging issues. We can all do the fun work, the easy work, but when it was time to step up to the plate in some of our most challenging and difficult circumstances, there's not another candidate in the race that stepped up to do that. Whether it was the disaster response, whether it was the shooting of Jacob Blake, whether it was pandemic response, whatever the case may have been, I am the one who has been tested before the candidate who has had to step up in the good times and in the bad times. So I do come in as the most experienced. I come in as the most qualified. And I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do. And with that being said, I've gotten as far as I've gotten because I was able to build a coalition. Didn't do any of this on my own. This means, you know, people from Beloit to Bayfield, people from Onalaska to Oshkosh, all over this state. I'm the person who has traveled, who has had the entire Wisconsin experience. There's not a person running right now who knows Wisconsin more than I do. There's not a person running that has built the deep connections with our rural communities, with urban communities and suburban communities, small businesses, everybody. That is the work I've been a part of, like I said, since before being a member of the legislature, is because I was an organizer and I recognized the importance of a big tent, recognizing the importance of making sure that we bring as many people together for a common purpose. And it is that experience that I am bringing to this race, and even beyond the race, I'm looking forward to showcasing that in office, the same way I've done as lieutenant governor.
Thank you so much. That's great. We really appreciate it. And I will mention that Menomonee Falls Action Team will be making an endorsement in the race. We still have a couple other candidates to hear from, and then we will be putting it to the members for a vote, and we'll be announcing that just as soon as we can. So we really appreciate you taking the time to stop by, and always thank you for your leadership.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. It is really an honor to be here to hang out with everybody, and let's go forward together, because that's the only way we're going to win. That's how we got it done before.